Hello and welcome to Inspire Presents Book Talk. Today I'm joined by the wonderful writer Masuda Snaith. Masuda is a novelist, teacher and former bookseller from Leicester. She was named one of the Observer's New Faces for Fiction in 2017 following the publication of her first novel, The Things We Thought We Knew. She's won a number of writing awards, including the Bristol Short Story Prize and the SI Leeds Prize. Her latest novel, How to Find Home, was a BBC Four book at bedtime and is out now in paperback. Hi Masuda, welcome to Book Talk.
Hello there.
Hi, how are you doing in these strange times? How are you finding lockdown?
I think like for a lot of people it's up and down, so some days it seems fine and then some days you suddenly have a wobble and realising how strange the world is at the minute and kind of forgetting. I think we're at the point now where you forget what normal life was like. Trying to adjust to this new world.
And of course, How to Find Home, it had its paperback release during lockdown. Has that been a strange experience and how has it differed from what would normally happen?
Well, for my first book, The Things We Thought We Knew, I decided that I would do an East Midlands book tour for the paperback release because I know that a lot of people wait for the paperback to come out. I'm one of those people normally, so I thought I'd make a big fuss of it. So I went to lots of bookshops and venues around the East Midlands because it was an East Midlands based book. So that was a very, very different experience from this time where basically I just had to tweet about it, and that's really put some stuff on my website. It was far more online, as is everything at the minute. So it was a different experience, but I think if anything we're learning from lockdown is just to adjust to what we can do.
Yeah, because of course we would have loved to have you in the library, so thanks for joining us virtually.
Yeah, I think I was due to be in a talk at a library as well, so I really missed the libraries. The fact the libraries aren't open is a big thing for me.
You definitely have to come and visit us when we can do that again.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. So to the book itself, I've got my copy here, very dog-eared I'm afraid, but I think that means well read, doesn't it? So.
I think it does. I
have to say I really did love this book. It's inventive, it's unflinching. I mean, at times it's quite sad and harrowing at times, but yet it's so full of hope and humanity, which actually I think that is something a lot of us need right now. So without giving any spoilers, can you tell us as the writer what the book is about?
So I always have this kind of elevator pitch kind of like one-liner for my novels, and for this one it was How to Find Home is a Wizard of Oz style adventure from Nottingham to Skegness with a homeless character as the main character. And that is it in a nutshell. It is the Wizard of Oz, but it just happens to have a homeless character as our Dorothy, or Molly in this case.
I'm actually quite fascinated by this retelling of the Wizard of Oz. What inspired you to take that route, especially considering the choice of characters and the destination, Skegness, doesn't obviously lend itself to the Wizard of Oz? Why?
That was very deliberate. So I knew that, with the subject matter, it's a homeless girl. She's kind of escaping a quite dark past. She's going on an adventure. It's not your typical adventure. Like we said, it's from Nottingham to Skegness. And what I thought I didn't want it to be was a kind of a really down, miserable read. I wanted there to be joy and hope in it. And that is something that I think you find in The Wizard of Oz. It's full of joy and hope, even though, there's a lot of peril in there. And as adventure stories usually do, have a lot of peril and dangers in it. I wanted that element, but I did want the hopeful, magical side as well.
Yeah, I definitely, it really does work so well. And actually, it made me go back to my own copy of The Wizard of Oz, which I read to my daughter, because when I was reading your book, it really chimed with me, and I had to go and look at the chapter headings, because even your chapter headings echo The Wizard of Oz, don't they?
Oh, I'm glad you noticed that. That was a very subtle thing. Because I had never read The Wizard of Oz, or if I had, it must have been when I was really young, because I didn't remember the actual original story. I just had the Judy Garland Technicolor version in my head. So when I decided to base the story on that, I read it for what felt like the first time, and I realized like the differences between the film and the book. And I really loved the element, like I said, of the adventure story in there. So I did want to put subtle clues in there, so each chapter heading is kind of mirrors a chapter heading that you would find in the original.
Yeah, like you say, it's very subtly done, but if you know the book, it really does work. But you know, you decided to take that route. As you was going on with the story of Molly and the other characters, was it exciting, liberating to use that idea of a retelling, or was it ever challenging as you was going through the story?
Well, I think for me as a writer, one of the worst things for me as a person who never used to plot a novel or a story or whatever I was writing is that, you know, the boundaries are so wide reaching that you could really go in any direction. So to have any boundaries or to put constraints on a story, I think usually is really useful because it stops you from going all over the place. And I did loosely base it on The Wizard of Oz. So I used it as a theme. I didn't go exactly, you know, it's not like an exact retelling of the story at all, but it was there as kind of the backbone. So it was actually a support for me to kind of always go back and refocus. What is the story about? What do I want to put in the story? So for me, I found it probably, it was constraining, but in a positive way, in a way that was actually quite useful.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. It's definitely subtle and backbone. That's a really good way of describing it, as holding all those characters together. And talking about those characters, as you've said, they are homeless, and these are voices from a community that I don't think are often heard. Could you tell us why you chose to tell the story of that community and what sort of research you did to bring their stories to life?
I mean, I think it's exactly what you've just said. It's not a story we often hear about. And it's something I've always been interested in because I grew up on a council estate. Our family didn't have a lot of money, but whenever we went to town, if there was homeless people, my mum would give me money to go and give to a homeless person. And my mum was very tight with her money. So the fact that she would do that made me, I think, probably highlighted it in my mind that there's something happening here, as well as, you know, the questions you have as a child of why is this person sleeping on the street? What's going on here? And as a writer, I think you're always thinking about what people's stories are. And I think it's more evident when you see someone sitting on the street that they have a story there. They had a reason for getting there. So that's why really I think that's where the inspiration came from. And then I think I did some research. I know I watched some things about homelessness that kind of just kept on bringing up the question. And then I decided that I would write about homelessness because I had a homeless character in another book that didn't work. She was just a side character and her character just kept growing. And I just ended up thinking, well, what is she doing now? What would she be doing now in this situation? So I thought, I will write this story because she wanted to be written, but I need to research it if I'm going to do it, because it's, like we said, a voice that we don't often hear about. And with marginalised voices, they can often be misrepresented, and I definitely didn't want to do that. So I actually, I did a writing residency in a homeless hostel in Leicester. I then did a short kind of volunteer role in a group that called New Futures in Leicester that works with sex workers. And I worked in various little charities that give out food and to the homeless. And through that, as well as lots of research on kind of reading books and looking at documentaries, I kind of got a flavour of the stories that were coming out from that.
Yeah, and those characters, they do come across as really real. One thing that struck me about the main character, Molly, was this wonderful inner voice that she's got as a narrator. The way she describes and thinks about things, it's often very deep and quite poetic at times. Yet she describes herself as a homeless person, that she's often invisible and she can be looked down upon. Was it important to you to give us such a strong, beautiful voice in that respect?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Because I think one of the things I really did get from people when I either heard about or spoke to people about homelessness is that feeling of invisibility and people walking past you and not even acknowledging you were there, and how that must work on someone's psychology. But also, I think because of Molly's past and how she has ended up on the street, she needs to have a strong character to get her through that mentally, to get her through all of that. So I think it came through to me as that type of voice. There's sometimes we don't have a choice about the voice, it kind of comes through that way, but definitely in terms of her imagination and how she kind of sees things, and sometimes sees things that aren't even there, but it helps her get through a certain situation. It really was a matter of how would she think to, so that she isn't, so every day isn't miserable, because obviously you can't live if you can't get through the days if every day you're just thinking about the misery. So she has to get herself through it somehow, and I think that's the voice there.
Yeah, it really is such a strong voice. But of course, I can't move on from talking about this book, particularly for our local viewers, without asking you about its physical setting. Obviously, the journey to Skegness, which is very familiar to us from the East Midlands, and it starts in Nottingham. It's a very strong sense of place. Was it important to you to get that right?
Yes, definitely. Some people ask why I chose Nottingham. My first book was set in Leicester, so obviously that's very familiar to me, that's where I was brought up, but I think Nottingham as my neighbour, you know, is kind of the place I'd often go to every so often, and you know, it's a little bit bigger, a little bit more razzmatazz than Leicester in some ways, and also I've got friends there, so I often do visit Nottingham, and it's really important to me to write about regional places, particularly the East Midlands or the Midlands, because I think we often get ignored. There's often a south and north debate, and often a very London-centric focus for novels. So I try and write about places that a lot of people are familiar with, but aren't necessarily put in literature. So Nottingham, I think, is a brilliant example of a very vibrant city. There's a lots going on, and like any major city, there's a lot of homelessness. So I did use it as an inspiration. I did go there often. I was going there anyway for other work, and walking up and down the canal, going around the city centre. So yeah, some of the pages will be very familiar to people who are from Nottingham, because I literally was walking around the kind of the Robin Hood area, and which was the tavern that's kind of down there. But I've now forgotten the name of. What's it called? The Old World Inn.
The Trip to Jerusalem.
A Trip to Jerusalem. Yeah. I can't believe I forgot that, because I researched that one quite a lot. And the castle and everything, and also the train station is quite a big feature in the novel as well. So I did want to make it a kind of book that was based on a place that if you went there, you would be familiar with it, and you would see that in the pages.
Yeah, as a Nottinghamshire reader, I really felt that. Like you said about the old trip, we went there as a family just before lockdown, and I worked out we'd sat in the same place as your characters had.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh yes, with the same stuff on the walls, yeah.
Yeah, and also, you know, the canal scenes, the navigation, the castle. It's really nice to read around familiar places, I think. So yeah, thanks for that. But there's also,
I think that just about Skegness as well. I just think it's like, as an East Midlands person, that's the place you go to when you go into the seaside. I remember it from my childhood as a place we'd regularly go to, and I think it's one of those places that, if you know, it's kind of caught between being a lovely like seaside place and a bit kind of not, or well, some people would say not taken care of. Some people react very differently to Skegness, depending on who I'm talking to. But I have a fondness for it because it was that childhood place we would go to. So that was kind of nice to be able to put that in as well.
Yeah, but because those places are going to be so familiar to readers, you know, I could picture myself on the roller coaster, etc. You got it right. Did you feel a pressure to get it so right?
I think with certain details, yes. Yeah, I don't know if it was a pressure actually. It was probably just the way I went about it. I decided that I would put real places in there, and to actually like physically be in the places, because that made it easier to write, to be honest, because I had the actual details. I could remember what it looked like. I could, you know, it just made it more vivid for me. I don't know if I would do that every time, because you do have to go to places to really experience it. But it was definitely very effective in helping me build the world, actually using the places.
Yeah, it is very authentic. But also some of the characters, outside of the main characters, the local characters, without giving anything away, they seem strikingly real. I wondered if any of those were based on real people you'd come across, or it's an amalgamation.
I think the only person that's really based on someone is Jules's character, which she's this very loud, I mean, you'll know because you've read the book, loud, outspoken, often quite unpredictable character. And she's not actually based on a homeless person. She's based on a woman I used to see on the bus, who would just be very, very like chatty with people, whether they wanted her to chat to them or not. But she had this like edge to her that just, again, it made me ask, like, what's her story, like how she always seemed to be on her own. She always wore like army camo gear, and it made me wonder who she was. And so that's the only character really based on a person, and again, person I don't really know but just got an impression of. The others are probably amalgamations of people, or people that, you know, you feel like that you could know them, I think, almost.
I could keep talking about this book, but there is only so much time. So I just wanted to go back to your first novel, The Things We Thought We Knew. I mean, that came out, your first novel, to such acclaim. That's what got you named as one of the Observer's New Faces of Fiction. It's such a very affecting novel. It deals with pain and memory, amongst other things. And again, it centres on a character whose story might not often be heard. Could you tell us a bit about the story and why you chose to tell it?
So The Things We Thought We Knew is about a British Bangladeshi girl who is brought up on a council estate in Leicester. So I always say it's not autobiographical at all. And she's suffering with chronic pain from something that's happened to her in the past. There's that we don't quite know what it is that caused an incident that has left her with chronic pain. She's in her mum's council estate flat, and her mum would really like her to get out and start having a life. So it's really her kind of battling with that, but also having lots of memories of the past and how she ended up in that situation. And I think, again, I wanted to write about those stories we don't normally hear about. So we don't normally hear about council estate life. We don't hear about the British and Asian experience, and both of those combined. But also, I think, just having those stories, those background details, but not necessarily those things being the story. So the story is about how she heals, and both emotionally and physically. And those other details are just part of her life. And that's my experience. You know, I don't go around thinking I'm an Asian woman, I'm from a council estate all day, every day. You can't live that way. It's definitely informed me, and it's created the character and person I am. But, you know, I have other stories. So that was kind of the impetus for that. I wanted to represent those different types of characters, but yeah, not necessarily have those things be the story.
I mean, this idea of highlighting underrepresented voices, you also take that into other areas of work. I know you sponsor a bursary for low-income writers for the SI Leeds Prize. It must be really important to you.
Yeah, well, the SI Leeds Prize is the one I won a few years back, which kind of kick-started everything for me, I think, as well as winning the Bristol Short Story Prize, because then I think it's really difficult if you're not from London or you've not got lots of connections to break into the industry. So that prize is very special to me. And also, as a working class writer, I know how difficult it was for me to make the decision of, can I afford to enter this competition? It could be a great opportunity, it could lead to great things, but can I financially afford it? So I just wanted to make that something that somebody else doesn't have to worry about, because we are not hearing voices from people because they cannot access the industry, or cannot, you know, have the time, because if you are financially constrained, you don't have the time to be writing if you've got 3 jobs, for example. So just to elevate that pressure a little bit, I think is something that I'm very passionate about and hope to do more of, actually.
Yeah, definitely very important work. I mean, you yourself, you, like you said, you came from a council estate in Leicester, and you've gone on to be an acclaimed novelist and even judging the book, the Costa Prize. And yeah, I suppose is
That
this
was
the way?
particularly exciting, I have to say. That was because I remember like watching the prize. When you wait for prizes to come out and see who's won and who's been shortlisted. So to be asked to be a judge on that was very exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I understand during lockdown you've been also helping writers by offering online writing courses. So again, you're giving back a bit there.
Yes, well, I was thinking, I think at the beginning of lockdown, I think a lot of us felt this. It's like, what can we do? Like, what can we do that's useful? My husband is a physiotherapist in the NHS. He works in the hospitals. He actually was working on intensive care for a period of time. And during that period, I was thinking, what am I contributing? I just felt quite useless. And although as proud as I am of him, I'm incredibly proud of him and the work he's been doing. So I thought, what can I do to actually help people through this time? And one of the things people can't do is go out and access workshops at the minute. So I thought I had a YouTube channel that had been dormant for quite a long time. I hadn't put anything on it. I think I've maybe had 2 or 3 things on it. And I thought, you know what, I've got a camera. I've been recently teaching at the De Montfort University. So I had all these kind of things I developed, these lessons. And I thought if I can make them really short so people can quickly see them, different topics like writing about description or plot or whatever it is you want to be looking at, then that could be something that's really useful to people. So yes, I've set up that channel, it's on the same channel, but I've set up that free writing course, I'm calling it, and you can just go onto YouTube and find it.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, we'll provide a link for that with this video. And what about your own writing? I mean, I know you've got that on, you've obviously got your little daughter. Are you finding time to do your own writing? Anything you're working on next?
So the major thing I am working on at the minute is book 3, which I'd kind of started a bit before lockdown, and then I think I really threw myself into it as much as I could when lockdown began, because there was that feeling of what shall I be doing during this period, as much as I could, balancing having childcare at the same time. And that's really where my focus is going to go for the next, I think, few months, probably a year. I don't know how long it's going to take. But I was also, I just finished my university course, so I was marking a lot of essays. So there was like the ongoing stuff. And hopefully, I don't know what's going to happen now, but I'm part of the Colonial Countrysides project, where I wrote some short stories connected to Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire and the colonial connections there, and that was going to be part of a big book, and hopefully that will still come out by the end of the year, because that's another topic I'm particularly passionate about.
Excellent. Well, when that one is out and when your new book is finished, you'll certainly have to come and visit us when we can get back in the libraries. But finally, I'd like to ask you, because our viewers are avid readers, and while obviously I'm recommending your novels, because apart from anything else, the storytelling and the characters are just wonderful. But I wanted to ask you as a reader about the type of books that you read, and if you've got a couple of recommendations for us.
So I guess like most people, it's the books that you kind of pick up and you read the back and you're like, this sounds really interesting. I usually do that thing of reading the first page and seeing if it's something that's for me. Before lockdown, I had been to the library and I got out. I'm so glad I got out my full whack of 12 books. And so I was fortunate enough to still have some of them. And I've read The Power by Naomi Alderman, which I really enjoyed. It's a good, fast-paced, very intelligent novel that I've really enjoyed reading. I would also recommend Blonde Roots by Bernardine Evaristo. Most people know about Girl, Woman, Other now, but this is a book I read years ago that just absolutely turns the narrative about slavery on its head by having a white girl from England being taken over to the New World in Africa and the slave trade being turned around. So it's actually African people who are the people who are I don't know how to say it. It's the other way around, basically.
Yeah.
And that is just a really brilliant book, because it does make you think about what slavery was and the dehumanization of people. And also a book I haven't yet read, but it's on my list and I really, really want to read it, and it's going to be my next book, is Lowborn by Kerry Hudson. I've had it for a while, but I don't read a lot of non-fiction unless it's connected to my novels. But I really do want to read that, because again, it's a working class story. It did incredibly well when it came out, and I've also met Kerry Hudson, and she's lovely. So I really do want to read that next.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I'd second The Power. Fantastic book. I haven't read the other two, but yeah, you've sold them to me, basically.
Oh, good.
Sadly, that comes to the end of our chat. I could talk for ages about your novels, but so I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic, and I know our readers are really going to like hearing about your work and your writing life.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really lovely to be able to still do these things in some form. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Masuda.
Bye.